lovers. I am so blessed and honored to be in a position to share, tools and tips and tricks that have the potential to heal and to bring you to a place of full sexual embodiment. And one of the tools that I absolutely love and have been using for the better part of a decade are crystal yoni products, including pleasure wands and yoni eggs. And I was so excited to recently come across a brand called Wands, Waands. I met the founder here in Austin and I absolutely loved who she was. I love getting to know the people behind the products that I like to use. And I just loved her mission to really support women and men to explore, celebrate, and honor their sexuality. I felt this transmission of slow, sensual seduction in all of who she was and all that she brought to the world. So I went ahead and gave it a try. I purchased a blue quartz Emerita wand, and the Emerita wand is great because it has this like cool bulby end on it, which is designed for G-spot and cervical stimulation, but can also be used for prostate stimulation. So it's great for men and women and can even be used between partners. So I'm so honored to have built this relationship with her and to be able to offer you guys an amazing discount code. So if you use the code LEOLA, LEOLA, that will give you 15% off all products. And the website is wands.com, WAANDS.com. And we'll go ahead and link that in the show notes as well for you. So thank you so much for listening. And also you're welcome for the inevitable pleasure and healing and ecstasy that is coming your way with these products. Let's dive into the episode. Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. Today, I am so excited to be in the brand new Talk Tantra to Me studio with our first guest in the new studio, Yuval, who is an artist of erotic love. I am so grateful for his content and so appreciative that he's here on the podcast to share his expertise on living an expansive life. So thank you for being here, Yuval. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about how you became an artist of erotic love? How did you discover this passion and purpose?
Thank you for having me, first and foremost. How? That's a good question. I mean, the simple story of it is that I was born to an Orthodox fundamentalist Jewish kind of upbringing. Boys only schools. You can imagine the lack of sex education or even connection with girls that I lacked. When I was 18, because I was born in Israel, I went to the army for 3 years. I was still so-called a virgin.
Yeah.
And I remember everybody around me is a secular environment already. So everybody around me are like talking about meeting girls in the weekends and, like having their first sexual experiences and so on and so forth. And feeling like out of the conversation completely.
Yeah.
My first sexual experience was when I was like 21, 22. I met my first partner. She was also ex-Jewish Orthodox. We met while I was serving in the army.
So when did you leave the Orthodox religion?
When I was like 17.
Okay.
Something like that. And I went to the Israeli occupation forces. Unfortunately, it's something that you will have to do. Otherwise, you go to jail in Israel. And you can imagine when I finished, when I was like 22, almost 23, I remember the day when I got out of the base after they cut my army ID. And I felt this tremendous sense of freedom and liberation. And I went to the field right next to the base and I rolled and lit a massive spliff. And right then and there, booked my first flight.
Wow.
To Europe, and I haven't stopped traveling since. So needless to say, I had like a massive hunger for experiencing.
Yeah.
I remember the mindset that I had. I was like, I want to be with all the women, have all the experiences, try all the psychedelic substances. I already discovered LSD at some point when I was in the army, and travel anywhere. And I think that propelled the next kind of decade of just traveling to anywhere I could. Slowly, I started being more and more fascinated with sex-positive communities in every place that I go, which propels me and got me into a lot of beautiful communities, like bondage communities, kink and fetish underground clubs in Europe and New York, fetish and kinky parties, both big ones and small ones. Eventually, I even facilitated a few. I had mentors of all kinds to different topics of sexuality, from shibari and bondage to a variety of other more relational topics.
Yeah.
And I've never thought that I'm gonna talk about it or teach it. It was never a plan. It was just really my own personal fascination. I always felt that relationships are such a massive part of our life. It's literally everything is relationships. And I realized, whether consciously or not, that the quality of my life is the quality of my relationships. And so I just studied and tried to experience as much as possible. And also fail a lot. And learn from mistakes, of course. And eventually, I think just about 3 years ago, during the pandemic, I found myself in this peculiar situation in which I was stuck during the pandemic in a so-called Tantra island in Koh Phangan, Thailand. I found myself in this three-way relationship with two magnificent witches. And when the pandemic started and we were all out of job, the company that I was running until then was kind of like ended as the pandemic started, for a variety of reasons. And we were all thinking like, oh, we love fucking, we love having sex, we love being with each other, we look beautiful when we do so, why don't we start an OnlyFans together? So that was kind of like and I mulled it over for a little bit longer, and then I was like, you know what, maybe there is something better that I can do. Like, what is really the goal here? I wanted to show how beautiful sexuality can be. I wanted to decolonize and deprogram a lot of the taboos and the generations of held suppression of sexuality, and show that sexuality can be a beautiful art, can be a natural expression of aliveness. And maybe I don't need to do OnlyFans for that and just contribute a little bit more pornographic, imagery for the spank bank, but rather maybe do something more educational. And this is how my first course came to be. We created it all together. Every time one of them was the model and the other was the camera woman. And we created this sensual alchemy course that I have right now. And from there, things started rolling around. I started talking about the topics. Social media picked up, different podcasts and media and whatever. And it just kind of rolled.
And here we are today.
And what is that today? What are you doing today? Just for people that don't know you, how are you showing up in the world? What are you offering? What are you excited about? What does it mean to be an artist of erotic love?
I feel like a lot has changed in my life since it all started. I was back then in a very hedonistic mood, which shifted quite a bit in the last couple of years. For once, I got into a devotional relationship with one woman, which was something that haven't happened much at least not consistently and for years over this decade of exploration.
Yeah.
You can imagine that it changed my attitude and outlook on certain things. Also went to, at some point, through a very life-changing, profound experience of what people call spiritual awakening of some sort, a heart that cracked open to love. And all of it together brought me to being a little bit less focused specifically on sexuality and more on relational intelligence and maybe eroticism, which is less about the physicality of a sex and more about the poetics, the artistic, the sensual.
You're saying that eroticism is more can you just repeat that last bit?
It's just a distinction that I'm making. It's not like a.
But I'm curious to go deeper on that. So can you repeat that last bit?
Yeah, so I feel like when we say sexuality, or when I was more focused on sexuality, like in my courses, I was talking a lot about physicality or technicality of it, like how to be a better lover, how to last longer in bed for men, how to so on and so forth, which is phenomenal and important. But I feel like personally, I got more and more curious and interested in the poetics of sexuality and eroticism, and how through our erotic aliveness we can tap into a deeper tapestry of our connection with all things, of the ecology that we emerged from. How eroticism is not just sex, penis go into a vagina, it's a life force energy, maybe something you can relate to very much from your path, that permeates through all existence and just happen to show itself in this moment through my body here in this moment. And how does that help me connect to the ecology that I emerged from, to the ecosystem that I'm connected with, to everything in existence? So those are kind of like the themes that I explore more now through my work. So I would say that's a big change.
I really like the distinction that you use to differentiate but also connect the concept of sexuality and eroticism in this like poetic sort of like story, or I don't know, it's like the difference to me, like sexuality is like you can like eat your food, and then there's like this eroticism that you're like, or you can have a story about your food and like be with your food and commune with your food. That's what I'm picking up from it. And I really enjoy that, and I resonate with this, like I resonate with that idea a lot. So beautiful. And now this has brought this title on, which is Artist of Eroticism, right?
Yeah, I mean the title changes all the time. I feel a bit silly having titles, and changing these titles. But I'm like, whatever.
I've been a sacred intimacy mentor and muse for like 3 or 4 years. And I was like, I don't know, is that accurate still? But it's just habit that I just keep saying it. So I've gone under this thought of like, do I revisit how I am portraying myself, even the podcast? So it's Talk Tantra to me, but so much of what Tantra is everything in my opinion. And we could have a whole, we will go into your perspective on Neo-Tantra versus Shaivism. But where was I going with this?
Titles.
Yes. So Talk Tantra to me. I came up with that name, 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And it really resonated then with this like playful perspective of Tantra and making it a little bit more light and approachable and youthful. And I do think that everything that I talk about is still tantric. However, I've gone into recently a little bit more of the darker realms and the taboo and the wild, and we'll also get into the wild hopefully in this conversation. But I actually had this idea to rebrand as Talk Taboo to me instead of Talk Tantra to me, and we'll see if that ever actually happens. But
I love that. I think that all of the taboo things are very much the shadow, both individually and also collectively. There is like a hidden thing that has mysteries to unfold. I think that for me, the conversation about sex, the conversation about death and dying and decay and grief and loss are very much intertwined, because what is sex is an energy of aliveness or life force energy. At the end of that spectrum, of that cycle, there is also death, decay. Neither of can exist without the other. Yeah. How can we speak about one and fully feel the immensity of it without the other, right? How can we be fully alive without touching death? So I like
I agree.
Do the rebranding. It's good.
It's tough because it's like I do know that so many people find me because they're particularly interested in Tantra, and everything that I'm exploring is Tantric. And the current chapter in my life, there has been grief and there has been death. I mean, it started, I think that to me, birth, sex, and death are like my holy trinity. Birth, sex, and death. And sex was like the first piece that I really explored. And there's always birth in every moment. There's always death in every moment. And there's sex as well. But I spent a lot of my time and energy on sex. And then in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of death. And then I find myself coming into this chapter as I'm married now and wanting to procreate. There's this other like really concrete lived experience of birth. And it won't be my first experience of birth, but it will be my first experience giving birth to a child, you know?
Wow.
So it's an interesting like time in my life to be in where there's lots of transition and these themes are really coming up. But then it's also talking taboo, talking about money and religion and, death. That's just really fascinating to me right now, especially because it's the things that people don't want to talk about. And I tend to be a bit rebellious and want to bring light to those things.
Yeah, me too.
And here we are doing it. So I would love to chat more about kind of your background in studying Tantra, in the different types of Tantra that have drawn you in and where you fall now with that.
So I'm by no means a Tantra practitioner or a scholar or an expert. Just simply a curious nerd. Yeah. Most of the knowledge that I am sharing about the topic, or everything that I learned about it, comes from mostly one main teacher of Shaivism Tantra, who is both a scholar and a practitioner, which I think is quite a good combination. His name is Harish Christopher Wallace. He wrote one, I think the most famous book is Tantra Illuminated. And what he, in that book and in many of his other kind of writings, he talks a lot about this cultural phenomena, which I feel like is part of a greater New Age kind of context of taking a word, a concept, a practice, maybe a few of them from an original, let's say, wisdom tradition like Hinduism, Buddhism, particular lineages in each of these, taking it out of the immense and original and full context of the cultural tradition that it comes from, and transforming it, using it in a more modern context in some form or another. I think one example of that is what you can call the mech mindfulness, which is like taking the idea of mindfulness or being mindful from mostly coming from Buddhist tradition and making it into a new age secular kind of practice of just being mindful of things, which there is a lot of criticism to say about that. For once, being mindful is not enough. You can be a mindful Nazi. You can be, you can do mindful, which is something that is happening. Corporations do mindful workshops to their employees, so they will be more productive, slaves of the corporation, ladder. So I think it's just important to be critical of these kind of trends. I think one of them that we all are familiar with is Tantra, which in the New Age perspective became something that is much of something that is very much related to sex and sexuality, or what called Neo-Tantra, which is a phenomenal movement, I feel, with caveats and nuances, and of course criticism, valid criticism to put on it, but nevertheless, it's a good movement of liberation of sexuality and maybe connecting sex and spirit and all this kind of beautiful juice. And at the same time, I feel like using this word without proper context does a bit of a disservice. Tantra originally means a bunch of things. It's Sanskrit. You cannot really translate it directly to English, but it's either weaving or simply systems. And it refers to I'm talking about the Tantra as like Kashmir Shaivism Tantra. It refers to a school of thought or philosophy that emerged in India and took over Southeast Asia in a matter of couple of years and decades, around 3,500 to 4,000 years ago, which brought this new thought of non-dual philosophy. And up until then, things were, at least most of the traditions were about, we're talking about like a monastic life and how to get into the divine through relinquishing desire and relinquishing sex. And it was something that was mostly for people who go to the monastic life, but not the regular life, like, what's called householders in the tradition.
Yeah.
The Tantrikas came and were like, no, everything is God. Everything is non-dual. There is no duality. So everything is God. Everything is the divine, and you get to the divine through everything. Part of it is also sex. Yes, householders have babies, have wives, have sex, have work. So yeah, through money, through work, through sex, through everything. But by no means it is a tradition that is revolving around sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is just something that is important to mention, and I'm sure that you are aware of as well.
Yeah.
Happy to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see this trend that Tantra tends to be quite sexualized, especially in the Western world. And I don't even think that it's necessarily a bad thing, because there gets to be a lot of healing in that part of our lives because of, society and conditioning and all that good stuff. And there is so much more to it. But I definitely align with the philosophy that it can all be sacred. And it really depends on your intention and your why and how you're going about your day. And someone that spends their day, just meditating for the sake of meditating because that's spiritual and that's what you do, I wouldn't say is as aligned with their higher self or spirituality as even like a postman who's doing a job that lights him up and he's bringing joy to people's lives and is connected to, like something bigger, and is not taking his day-to-day personally and is still like showing up in purpose, and then maybe is going home and having a glass of wine and enjoying his family. Like that is that's more of a legitimate spiritual experience in some ways than just waking up at 5 a.m. to meditate all day just to do it because that's what is supposed to be spiritual personally.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
for sure. I think that the only kind of valid criticism or kind of caveat that is important to bring is that when we use certain philosophy or borrow some practices from a certain tradition, it's really important to look at the full, or at least as full as we can, at least strive towards having a fuller understanding of the cultural, ethical, moral, religious, philosophical context that it comes from. Because without it, just like with mindfulness, if you take just mindfulness without the ethics and the cultural philosophy and the governing systems and the cultural systems that are very complex and very rich in Buddhism, you get some version of something that can also be used and utilized as a tool for harm. And I think it's also true with sexuality. It's such a powerful life force. Just an anecdote to demonstrate what I'm talking about is hanging out in places like Tantra Island in Koh Phangan in Thailand and other so-called conscious communities. You get a lot of people who are using things from the Neo-Tantra perspective, like lingam massage, yoni massage, Tantra healing, this or that. People who have no idea what is Kashmir Shaivism Tantra even is, or don't have it as a practice. And although all of these things could be phenomenally healing and powerful, are also being used in all kinds of manipulative ways by people who have just selfish desires masked as something spiritual. Like, come here, baby, and I'm going to give you a yoni massage, and I'm going to heal your with a sexual trauma, and actually he just want to touch some,
Yeah, and I can speak about that from personal experience as well, being in the industry. One of the first teachers that I went to, who was a male, totally crossed my boundaries and violated me. And it was one of those situations where it's like, I know that this is out of integrity with the work. And thankfully, I was able to process and heal from it and separate the actions of this one person from the entirety of the religion. But it was shortly after that I actually began exploring more of the white tantric path. So my entry, a similar or a different framing for tantra is red tantra and white tantra. So the red tantric path is like, more of the connecting with other people, and there's a lot of space for non-monogamy and plant medicine and lingam and all of that, whereas the white tantric is the more monastic, internal self-love, inner masculine, feminine wholeness within. And I didn't have that foundation super strong. when I first started working with the teachers that were like learning about the sexual stuff was exciting and it was fun. And I think that's what draws a lot of people in. But once I had more of a background of white Tantra, I felt more holistic and actually able to explore red Tantra more safely and also in an empowered way. So yeah, that was my.
Yeah, I think it's merely like a warning or like a soft warning for people who are going into these communities or these teachers or these people or workshops in order to heal something, which is a lot of times pretty vulnerable people. You know, they have some past sexual experiences or some sexual challenges they are experiencing. And just notice who is look at the teacher who you are looking at. And I think a pretty good rule of thumb is teachers of any kind of thing that involves sexuality should never be involved sexually in any way with their students. I think this is quite a consistent criticism that I have on the ISTA community that I've been shouting from the rooftops forever. I know a lot of the people from the top kind of teachers to people, a lot of my friends who've been going forever to such communities. I think they bring a lot of wonderful stuff. And I think it's also something that the organization itself is aware of and kind of working on. Hopefully they're doing a good job. I have no idea to testify for that. But I think that a lot of problematic stuff that I heard personally from women who've been deeply hurt and also things that I've witnessed, just be careful. And not everybody who says that they are some kind of portray or look like they are some spiritual or something are necessarily having your best interest at heart. Being spiritual doesn't necessarily mean being humanly evolved in any way, shape, or form. You can be spiritually awakened, but not evolve at all in emotional intelligence or trauma-informed or anything of that nature. There is waking up and then there is growing up, and they are two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to highlight that there's shadow on all sides of it. Like even when I went to the white Tantra training where, you know, we weren't as encouraged to get naked and it wasn't as much about the sexuality, it was more about the inner union. They had a plant medicine ceremony as like an optional add-on part. And one of my friends did it and was actually had a bad experience, was like groped by the facilitator in that. And so it's like even in no matter the space, there's likely some shadow lingering. So I think that the main thing is just being really discerning and taking it really slowly. And I definitely recommend not getting like, if you're going to go get a Tantra massage or work with a Tantra facilitator, not getting naked with them the first time that you're working with them, really building up, making sure that they're in integrity with the work, that they're, you know, communicating things like consent and boundaries and stuff like that. With ISTA, I think that it's a great program, but I also see and have felt the shadow in it. I haven't been deeply connected to it, but I'm not a hard no to the facilitators being in the field and connecting with the students. I think that their argument is that it's a part of honoring the fullness of our attraction and desire. And I think that can be a good thing to, rather than just like completely shut it down, to acknowledge that it's there. But I have heard a lot of facilitators that were taking that completely out of context and way too far and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think considering the current cultural landscape that we live in, the nature of the people who gravitate towards, especially women who gravitate towards these spaces, and the nature of men, not like inherently, but more like programming. It's just too dangerous of a combination.
Yeah.
You know, you can be very wise and very adept in what you're talking about and think that you are doing something for, you know, like in integrity. And then there is a beautiful woman in front of you and you're losing it completely because, you know, to me, it just feels off. But I mean, I'm not saying that as kind of like an ultimate authority on them. It's just simply reflections of what comes up for me when I see a teacher getting involved with a student. And I'm like, are you really 100% doing so, but if you're involved sexually, you have something to gain, right? And a teacher-student relationship should be selfless, should be only giving. And I think a lot of this time, the justification for this kind of stuff is that like almost some kind of a spiritualized way of like, oh, if you have sex with me, you'll gain some spiritual clout, or some also close-knit communities like Easter, you can very easily get into a group dynamic of, in order to be included in like the in, because the teachers and the helpers are kind of like this in group of like in the know, and then new people come in and they want to be in the know. So now the teacher, this like revered character comes and wants to spend time with me. Of course, I'm going to be more open to it. And that creates a very delicate and very problematic power dynamic. So
it does.
I think, it's just something to be discerning about, I guess.
Yeah, when you're dealing with the hierarchy as well as groupthink, those are two potentially problematic spaces to be incorporating. Then another really powerful energy, such as sexuality and pleasure, which is mind altering. So I totally hear you on all of it. And I think that there are ways to do it that are in integrity. And maybe it's not, having participants engage when it's their first entry into the space, because that's the thing with ISTA as well, is that it's like anyone can pretty much go and buy a ticket, and you're only participants will fill out a whole intake form, but like you're not getting that's at their word, you're not getting the whole history, you don't know them really, and there's in the field it's 3 main facilitators and 40, 60, sometimes 70 participants. So how can you really be discerning when you aren't really spending time with someone enough to know if it's in service of everyone to be in that space? Because I do think that there's a space where the teacher can be I think that there's a lot of value for the teacher to have an experience with a facilitator at the same time.
I'm curious actually to hear like what are the benefits that you see in a teacher in, let's say, ISTA or any other kind of workshop that involves sexuality, whether it's a temple space of some kind, ISTA, Haydn, whatever, any kind of tantric, so-called tantric workshop. What is the value of a teacher getting involved sexually in their own workshop or teaching with a student?
I think that it's the same value that you would have connecting with any other person. I think that there's also this level for me that's like, if we are all becoming our own guru, and like I'm very much about like, let's take each other off of this pedestal. Yes, I am teaching. And I also want to be clear, I'm not someone that's like out in the field connecting a lot, but I have connected with facilitators in the past, and I did get a lot of value from it, and I learned a lot. And I learned a lot from other lovers that I have that aren't facilitators. I think that we have the ability to meet and to learn and to grow with different types of mirrors. And the facilitators are their own mirrors that offer, a different lesson, and it's depends on the individual what that could potentially be. But at the end of the day, what is to get from it as a participant engaging with a facilitator is whatever divine karmic lesson is meant for that unique person. Personally.
Well, thank you for illuminating a different perspective. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I've also heard and seen it happen, and I've co-facilitated with people and watched them interact with other people and been like, I don't think that that's the right call. I think that it's a very delicate matter, and it can be looked at from different sides. So, but I am happy to hear ISTA is changing some things, but I'm not in the loop really. I haven't.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to bring ISTA as like a point of topic per se. It's more like to speak to the greater tendency of New Age thought to take kind of like wisdom traditions and then pick like a buffet of like spiritual experience, like pick a little bit from here, a little from there, like cacao with plant medicine, with this, with some ecstatic dance and this and that, and mix it all together into some kind of like a festival of
delight.
And I think it's a natural thing to occur, that cultures mix. And also it comes with certain challenges. So yeah, just wanted to speak about that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's definitely an interesting creative way to work, and even to work in purpose. And there is also a lot of responsibility to uphold the tradition in its highest as well.
I feel like because of all of this, at least in my work, and it's not something that I think everybody should do or anything.
Yeah.
I'm just like, we started all of this because we spoke about titles, you
Yeah.
know, so we spoke about changing titles, and also how quite funny the existence of them are. I think I connect more than anything with artists because of that, because it's open to so much interpretation. When I'm talking about the topics that I'm talking about, I'm trying to avoid as much as possible existing spiritual, new age kind of rhetoric, and try to find out, just if not for the sake of clarity, so anybody can relate with it, whether they feel spiritual or not, whether they are following a certain tradition or not, whether they are familiar with the kind of words or not. But also for me, I feel like it's a beautiful art form to find new, fresh language to express the human experience in new and exciting ways. So for me, talking about sex and sexuality and eroticism, and maybe how our eroticism and its poetics, what it can teach us about our place in the cosmos, about our interconnectedness with all things, about how reality is not a set of individual things, but rather a web of mutually transformative relationships. And I love talking about these things in words that I feel anybody can relate to and are not necessarily overused as a lot of the, if we are going to feminine, masculine energies and all kinds of words that are being very much used in certain circles, I'm trying to avoid it and find like more fresh, more poetic, language. It's just my own personal project. It doesn't have to be anyone's cup of tea. I think a lot of people are good following a particular tradition and staying true to it. Personally, I feel that my spiritual practice is something that is incredibly private. I don't go around and get people into my path. I feel like it's something that is very, very personal and unique. So I'm trying to take the lessons and the direct experiences that I gain through my spiritual practice and use them in the world in ways that I can speak with anybody. I can speak with normies, so-called, in a way that doesn't create a dichotomy between more spiritual and less spiritual people, because we are all human beings participating in this fabric of life. There is no distinction, there is nothing more spiritual than anything else.
And I think that that's kind of how I feel about the potential of engaging with a facilitator, is like, what if you're taking them off the pedestal and it's just two people that are connecting? But I think that it does take really acknowledging a container and the hierarchy that is there for that, which is can be problematic. But I love how you've taken on the title, or are trying on the title, or however you want to put it, of artist. I really resonate with that, and I love the way that you spoke about that as well. I had mentioned that I've used in the past muse, like sacred intimacy muse, and because to me it's about like, I'm gonna live my full life and show the things that have worked for me, and maybe it's inspiring to you and I'm your muse, but you're the artist, you get to decide what that looks like for you. So I like that you brought that in a different angle as well. It's really cool.
And eroticism is just one expression of it. Like I dance, I move, I write, I express myself in all the ways. And talking about muse, I also want to inspire people to do it as well. Like you are a constantly evolving expression of aliveness. Billions of years of evolutionary unfolding that is expressing itself and moving through you in this feeling, sensing body. What does it want to do? What is alive for you right now? We are so disconnected from our feelings and sensations. We demonize, just like we demonized sex and money and death and grief, we demonized half of our sensations and experiences, because just being happy and joyful is good, but the rest, it's too heavy, it's too much, let's not talk about it. It's, either avoid it altogether, suppress it, or brush it under the rug. And it created a certain disconnect from our experience, from our authenticity, from what's alive for us. And that's art. What is art? It's an authentic expression. It can be in anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's alive and vibrates through you in this moment. It can be in words, in movement, in the way that you think, in the way that you speak, in the way that you sing, in the way that you write and dance and move, and anything. Like your entire life is an art. Sexuality is just part of it.
Yeah. The art of living.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
They say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And this is something that I really, really resonate with. And as I've invested in living a tantric lifestyle, my relationships have evolved and become so much more juicy and liberating. And I believe that this is something that everyone deserves. However, finding these people can be a little bit challenging at first. And so it is my mission to create more spaces for people to find individuals that are resonant with the tantric lifestyle, that are really resonant with you, the listener, the person who is investing their time into living a life that is expansive and liberating. So with that, I'm committed to creating more and more safe spaces for people to discover their desires and practice their boundaries, to connect in community, to celebrate and to grow together so that we can all step into a more authentic version of ourselves and experience truly unconditional love. So we have Tantra retreats for men, women, couples, singles. We also have female-only retreats, just for the ladies stepping into their divine feminine. We have play parties. We have Tantra workshops, Tantra yoga, women's circles. We've got all kinds of really powerful in-person events. You can find all the details at www.talktantratome.com/events. You can also just go to talktantratome.com and click the events tab to find out about all the latest and the greatest. And if you're wanting me all to yourself, I can't blame you. I also host private retreats for both individuals and couples. Those are one-on-one. You get me all to yourself. And I'm available for private Tantra workshops and performances. And this is great for events like your birthday, or maybe a bachelorette party or bachelor weekend. We can talk and create something that will be extra special just for you. So I cannot wait to connect with you in real life. But for now, thanks so much for your patience with this brief interruption, and let's get back to the episode.
Speaking of art takes this sense of curiosity to be viewing the art, to be viewing your life, and to be making art from it. And I know that you talk and speak a lot about approaching sexuality and intimacy, but also life from this playful curiosity space. I'd love if we could pivot into that a little bit.
I feel like curiosity is the base, the kind of default state when we are fully open to our aliveness, to our sensations. When I say aliveness, I just mean this life that is in you. So it includes, because really what we are just massive digestive systems of feelings and emotions and sensual experiences. That's what we are. Yeah. This entire body, this nervous system, this skin, these organs, like it's the whole thing. We're not only digesting food, we're digesting emotional experiences that flow through our body mind all the time. The more we are aware of that and sit with that and open to all the sensations without suppressing any of them, without distraction, there is always a default state of curiosity that emerges. It's almost as if, some people call it intuition. Mm-hmm. I think what it really is just becoming present and still enough with what life, what kind of experience vibrate through you in this moment, and allow it to move you. What does it feel like? Beyond words. maybe it doesn't have words. Maybe feelings and all the catalogs and the kind of labels that we gave them, maybe they are limiting us a little bit. How does it feel being me without words? This experience. And where does it take me?
Yeah.
And it's always taking you somewhere. Because this is what the evolutionary unfolding that you are merely part of is. It's always playing.
Mm-hmm.
In order for you and I to exist, there needs to be an infinite number of unsuccessful relationships in which few elements try to connect together and it didn't work out and, it moved on. And then a lot of really successful ones in order to create you and I. So many from the stardust to the dinosaurs and the lizard that you were and the fish and then the alligator and then the monkey and and then this and your parents and all of your lineage and ancestry, all of these successful relationships and many, many more unsuccessful relationships. What is all of this process? It's playfulness, It's life is play. When you look at a child before they have been programmed into numb adulthood of avoiding their feelings, before the adults came and told them, oh, stop crying, or, stop expressing this emotion. They express their love to the world by playing, Everything is play. Like they look at a wall, I'm sure you remember this. You look at a wall and you saw like a crack in the thing and you started imagining like faces and, creatures. It's using imagination. It's looking at things and playing with them and putting them in the mouth and trying them out and like feeling them. It's like all play. And I think we are also like that. We just forgot a little bit,
Yeah, and I think it's also we just begin to see enough that we go into this reactionary state over and over again instead of seeing each moment as fresh and new, and how can we make it bigger by really recognizing that even though we might have seen something similar or experienced something like it in the past, it's actually a completely different moment. And if we can meet it with that same level of presence that a child does, that same curiosity of, okay, I'm here now. How do I want to make love to life in this moment, instead of going into our immediate reaction, which is often based on boredom or survival or something less juicy and inspiring. That's how I feel about it.
You absolutely right. And I saw, I think, a post from you recently in the last couple of days about how to touch your partners if you're touching them for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And it really inspired me to also write about it a little bit. And I think that's also, that's it, like, yes, your partner, how they look like, how their body feels, how they move and their mannerism, and you think, or at least you think, but do you?
Yeah.
This moment have never existed before.
Mm-hmm.
And we are constantly evolving aliveness, You are constantly becoming something. Our body changes, our feelings and mood changes.
Mm-hmm.
The fabric of our very body changes and transforms all the time. Our gene expression is changing. Our nervous system configuration. Of course, our sexuality, our fantasies, everything changes.
Yeah.
So it is new all the time.
Yeah, and that's bringing back that concept of like, we're constantly born anew. Every day there's like a different cocktail of emotions and hormones and lived experience from the previous days that does create this whole new person that, like, there's always this transformation, which is the sex piece, and there's also parts of us dying in every day and every moment. So it's like, when you can see how intertwined all of this is in the day-to-day and recognize that, we're constantly evolving, then you can see that it is, wow, nice to meet you again, my partner who's had a day that I wasn't a part of because they were off doing their thing and I was off doing my thing, and now we're here, and how do we meet each other again and fall in love deeper with the moment with each other? And I think that that's a thing that does lead to the intimacy dying in relationships, or just growing apart in relationships, is this sense of treating our partner as this boring old thing that we're used to. But if we were able to approach it from like, you're new again and now I get to fall in love with someone different. I mean, there's lots of different ways to romanticize this idea, but that excites me personally.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned just briefly this, every day something is born and some things are dying. And I think that's a big part of it. part of why we start taking our partners for granted, or start looking at the world around us as if it's all familiar and all known and boring, is because we hide from the fact of our mortality. From, we are so afraid of the inherent eventual death of the object of our love, that we never fully open up to loving it.
Yeah.
Like, how hurting could I possibly be if I lose my partner? It's an unconscious process usually, but how painful would it be? I may as well just numb myself completely to fully opening to the vulnerable, delicious juiciness of really loving and being loved by someone, because it will die. I will die, they will die, our love will die, all of this will die. And I think that's a big part of it, like how alive are we before we fully opened up to the inherent death of all of that's alive,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I like to think of falling in love or choosing love as this deeply courageous act, because it's saying, I'm willing, like, I know that this is going to end in pain. Either we're going to separate because one of us dies, or we're going to break up, or whatever, but to still be a yes to getting to know yourself better and the universe better and the other at the same time through the vehicle of a loving relationship it's a courageous thing. And it's interesting that we're talking about this, because I felt another layer of that deep feeling coming up in my own relationship in the transition that we're in currently. I have my background or my wounding has been more of like anxious attachment and like fear of losing, the rejection, abandonment, all that kind of stuff. And I've healed a lot of it and I've worked on a lot of it, but there's always a new initiation in it. And there's been this new initiation where I'm in this space where it's like, I have everything I've ever wanted and more, and it's amazing and juicy. But there's this part of me inside that's like sad and hurt and is like deeply afraid that like I can't actually, like I'm struggling to actually be in this and enjoy it, because like there's a fear piece there. And so it's something that I've been, working on, and I'm not on the other side of it yet either, to be honest. But I think that a lot of us just don't even want to touch that, and so they just like they just stop it at a certain point. And it's like, okay, how can I actually lean into this feeling and get curious about it, and know that actually if I'm able to lean into the pain piece, then maybe I'll actually be able to enjoy the pleasure piece more. And that's what I've seen happen over and over again, and I trust that that's what's gonna happen with this piece as well.
Yes, and I like to look at it in like the full range of the human experience in this kind of spectrum. In the work that we do, we speak a lot sometimes about becoming multi-orgasmic. And there's many approaches to take to this topic, but a lot of people hear it, and because we are so programmed to think like that, we immediately look at it as yet again another high to conquer, another practice to get, when in fact the actual practice is opening up to the orgasmic aliveness in all of life's experiences, in all of the human experience. That is becoming. So you can look at this a whole spectrum of. I just had this like thought one day, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. Let's say the full human experience is on a spectrum of aliveness. The lowest part, the least orgasmic that you can be, is maybe as close as you can get to death while still being in a body, like apathy or deep depression. What is depression? It's no expression, right? Like there is no desire to get out of bed, no desire to do anything, or apathy that is like just lack of care about anything at all. It's like you're still alive, but there is very little life there, very little aliveness. And then you go all the way up to the most extreme, which is like states of consciousness that have been, written about and being experienced by all kinds of practitioners and yogis and, people in all kinds of traditions for thousands of years, like states like samadhi, which is such states of bliss that you almost leave your body. right? And I think we always live somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And once you recognize that, that is becoming multi-orgasmic. It's like, oh, that too. Like, that is the evolutionary orgasm that is pulsating through my body in this moment right now. And if it's fear and some tenderness, and that's it.
Yeah.
That is it. And you lean into it. Recently, I've been experiencing a lot of personal and collective pain, facing what is happening right now in, the place of my birth and in Gaza, and what the state of Israel is enacting, the type of violence that it's enacting on a whole population of my brothers and sisters in the name of me and other Jewish people. And everything that comes from it. I feel the collective pain just looking at a genocide happening in front of my eyes, and also losing contact with my family and a lot of my friends. And yeah, just really, it's a heavy time, And I had a conversation about it with my partner the other day. We were talking about the difference between heaviness that we label as negative and between heaviness that is a direct product of having a heart that is open and seeing the pain in the world, the atrocities in the world, the systems that we've put in place that constantly enact violent and atrocities against our fellow human beings. A heaviness that comes from recognizing oneself as an inseparable part of the whole. And I think I told her that when I don't see that one as negative or something to avoid.
Yeah.
In fact, it's one of the most inspiring and deeply nourishing currents of aliveness that I've experienced in a long time. I feel like it's shifting who I am and what I choose to do in the world and how I act and everything about me as we speak, like as it happens. And that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
When we open to this pain, to this the inherent pain of the human experience, it not only allows us to open and break our hearts to compassion towards more, to include more beings and more systems of life in our aliveness, but also it moves us and mold us into greater and greater expression in this life. And also, talking about pleasure and sex, it allows us to experience more of the joy and the beauty in life. I saw someone writing today that usually we have this dichotomy between Western systems of thought, which are more about like going inwards and contemplation, Western systems of thought that are more about going external. We need something in between that is neither about retrieving away from the world and rejecting it. It's something that is in between. It's a system that allows us to recognize the devastating beauty of the world, to open up fully to the grief and the loss as we are open fully to the ecstatic pleasure and the joy, because they are all one. They're all part of this experience. And I feel like that's the place for me of playful curiosity, is approaching any and every experience that runs through my body mind, that awakens without looking away, embracing it all, whatever that might be. Yeah.
So many things I want to double click on in that gorgeous monologue, Artistry of Life. The first thing is that's coming up kind of based on what you were saying near the close there was feeling the pleasure, but also feeling the pain, feeling the despair, feeling the grief. Like, is it possible to feel both of those? Is it okay to feel both of those? Like, I think I sense a lot of people in the field that are feeling like guilt around living their lives in this time and not knowing like how to feel, like just feeling blocked in it. And I'm hearing from you, it's like, feel all of that, welcome in the devastating heartbreak, but also don't forget about this other piece. So I'd love to just go a little deeper on that.
I mean, fuck yeah, because I'm not an authority on this. I'm very much
we're all just humans.
I'm going through the process right now. I'm
Yeah.
having these questions with myself. I find it hard to enjoy certain, my personal life on a very personal level are very joyful and abundant and open and full of opportunities and full of opportunities for pleasure. And recently I find it the last couple of months, I find it really, really hard, or increasingly harder to fully let in and fully enjoy. So it's very much a process that I'm going through, and I'm looking forward to see what it molds me into. And I think both on an individual and on a collective level, those are the questions and the feelings and the doubts that we should have, And maybe less from a place of shame, or like, how dare I enjoy my life when other people are suffering? More like, here is joy, and here is also a lot of collective suffering. And I don't want to forget that. And I want that to be part of my heart. And I want that to be part of my decision making in life. And I want that to be part of who I am as a human being, and the kind of art that I make, and the way I speak about the world. So, talking about non-duality, it's all of it.
I've had this piece come up too, where it's like there's been different variations of conflict since the beginning of humanity, but the same death, the same rape, the same children, all of it. And it's like, we're at this really unique time though, too, where we have the internet and media. And we also have this really interesting piece where there's lots of people beginning to become more aware of big picture thinking, and they're educated in their spirituality, and there's so many resources. And it's like, do you think that there's a piece, like, I get into these spaces of existentialism of like trying to like, why and what and how, and like, I don't really know where I'm going with this question, but I think that there's also this piece that's like, the world is evolving, and like maybe part of this conflict is breaking people's hearts open, and there is a bigger piece to this. Similarly, when Trump became president, for example, I had this piece that was like, wouldn't be my choice, and also like people are talking about shit that they never talked about before because of this.
Yeah.
And it's in a way it's pushing people away, but it's also bringing people together, and it's getting new thoughts out. And maybe I don't know, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, I saw this sentence circulating around the web, and it really resonated with me, and I started actually writing a piece that I'm going to publish soon. We say in the struggle of Palestinian liberation, we say free Palestine, but someone says, we are not here freeing Palestine. Palestinians are freeing us. Palestine is freeing us. Like the very opportunity, the front seat that we get to just witnessing this horrific atrocity happening, and how it opens everybody's minds and hearts to not just to the pain, but to like, wait a moment, what are these systems that we put in place? What is this all about? Like, how did this came to be? How come this is reality? Like the formation of the current geopolitical structure that we have in the world, the formation of states, the formation of universal bodies like the UN, and what are they, and how all of this come to be. And more than anything, probably the history of colonialism and how it affects literally everything you put your eyes on in this modern day and age, everywhere in the world. And that kind of push is freeing us, because until all of us are free, none of us are free. And being free means being able to look at the world. It's not just a technical freedom of self-determination, which is absolutely something we should all strive for, but it's also an inner personal freedom of being able to look at the world and understand it and see it beyond the masks of programming and the misinformation and the campaigns of well-funded propaganda. And as well as our own patterns and our own discrimination and our own sense of superiority and our own internal misogyny and racism and colonialist mentality. And I think all of these things, when we witness this pain, when we witness this suffering, when we witness this struggle, if we are willing to look at it, it frees us. And yeah.
Okay. I have one more question before we wrap up related to this, which is, what do you recommend people do, or how do they look at this? I feel like there's lots of pressure to pick this side or pick that side, or share this or say that, or, you know, like take a stance, and also being like, I don't even know, and like feeling just the polarity in it. And you've already spoken a bit about this, but I'm curious if you have any last piece.
Yeah. It's all connected, right? Like we understand, at least I hope we understand that.
I don't think everyone does, but
yeah, but
I think that,
at least this is an opportunity.
Yes.
This is a curiosity. You know, I'm not here to speak on people from above. I'm just another human looking at the world with the same complexity that everybody else is looking at it, and I'm trying to make sense of it. To this particular topic of Palestinian liberation, I have a unique perspective because I have an in on it. I lived in Israel most of my life next to mostly like pretty extreme settlers. I served in the Israeli occupation forces. I served in the West Bank. I have Palestinian friends. I have a lot of, obviously, Israeli friends. I understand it. I study the topic very well. But that's not the point. I think that really what I want to send the curious minds to look at the ways in which this struggle is an expression or a microcosm of the struggle of liberation of humanity as a whole. If you start to look at this, you know, particular conflict, and you realize that it helps you go and explore how colonialism and white supremacy have been literally dictating everything in the systems that we currently have right now. The political systems, the monetary systems, the social systems, the law systems, the system of thoughts, even therapeutic modalities that we use are full with a separative, individualistic, white supremacist, colonialist mindset that doesn't understand trauma as a collective thing, because it doesn't see humanity as a collective that is inherently connected to the ecology, but rather as separated individuals, and therefore their trauma should be worked on them separately as individuals. As Krishnamurti says, it's not a measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick world, right? And that's what our current systems of therapy and mostly our current system of Western thought therapy, this is what they are trying to do, to help you be well-adjusted. Well-adjusted to what? Maybe you're supposed to be enraged. Maybe you're supposed to be anxious. Maybe you're supposed to be fearful. Maybe you're supposed to be in pain because this is the world that we are living in, you know? Maybe this is your aliveness. So all of that to say that all of these things are connected. We are sitting here and talking about sexuality and taboo and death and our relationship with death and grief and loss and the shadow aspect of our feelings, both individually and collectively. All of these things are all decolonizing our minds and hearts from the oppression of the powers that be, from the oppression of systems that see us and everything else in reality as separated, materialistically separated entities. Rather, they're a cohesive, mutually transformative web of relationships with a biodiversity. Everything in the biosphere is necessary for the health of the biosphere. We cannot be free without everybody being free. We cannot be here enjoying our lavish lifestyle when there are people on the other side of the world deeply suffering for us to be able to enjoy that. And it's not you and I that put the system in place. Nevertheless, we are here. We feel that. We are willing to look at it. And if there is anything that I would tell people to do is to look at who is suffering and listen to them. If you're trying to make sense of a situation, if there is a relationship and there is one side that is deeply hurting, who needs to do the listening? You know?
And that's another way to look at the curiosity piece as well. How can we be curious about where is the suffering coming from?
Ask the people who are currently being
Yeah.
bombarded.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the people who are currently being enslaved in cobalt mines in Congo.
Mm-hmm.
Ask women of color, queer people. Ask them what they are experiencing, and they will tell you. They will tell you. Ask Native Americans, and they will tell you. For them, it's not something they finally got into. Like they grew up. It's in their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
The effects and the after effects and the after effects of colonialism and brutality. It's in their DNA. They see the world through the lens of colonialism and oppression already because they've been, suppressed by this system. And I think we will all we spoke before about like living a comfortable life and feeling ashamed of it. Maybe let's turn this shame into curiosity.
More productive.
And go ask the people,
Mm-hmm.
And they will tell us. There is ancient wisdom that in our chase of more and comfort, we left behind. Yes, we achieved magnificent things. And I don't advocate us living back in hats. But we've also lost a lot of things in the way.
Yeah.
Namely, how to relate with the natural world. How to relate with each other in a way that is beneficial. What is our place here? What are we even doing here? And those that are oppressed have the wisdom for us. So I'll just say that, and people should go and form their own perceptions.
I love it. I think that it's important to recognize too that when we think about the people that have historically been oppressed throughout the ages, it's often because they have an insightful wisdom. Even people like Galileo, Jesus, Joan of Arc, all of these people. The witches, exactly. And so it's thinking about, okay, what is happening today? And also being curious about ourselves, what parts of ourselves are hurting and how are we oppressing ourselves or how are we buying into a system that's oppressing us?
Yeah.
Curiosity.
It shouldn't be a polarizing topic.
Mm-hmm.
If there is suffering, we should all be investigating why there is suffering and how we can alleviate some of that. It shouldn't be us versus them. It shouldn't be these people versus these people. We want to liberate and decolonize all people.
Yes. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Amen. Okay. I mean, I feel like, and there's so much more we could talk about with this and all of it. And we've gotten so much from this. And thank you so much for being here. Do you mind just sharing a little bit more about where people can find you, support you, all that stuff?
Of course. Find me everywhere on social media. Yuval Man, like a man, but with double N. Yuval Man. I have a website. I have an email. I have social media. I'm answering DMs. I love connecting with people.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And all that will be linked in the show notes. But thank you so much for being here and bringing all of you. And this was such a fun conversation for me. I liked every part of it, including the parts where we had different perspectives.
I love that too.
And I felt like I learned so much from you. And I'm sure that the listeners are feeling very similarly. And it was also great to just have someone that has your lived experience, especially in this time. So thank you for that vulnerable piece as well and sharing your heart. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you for having me. That was a joy.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to the listener for opening yourself up to the idea of curiosity and multi-orgasmic expression and artistry and the modern world and all the things. Have a sexy and spiritual day, and I'll catch you next week on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.